Hey Central Texas, First Alert Meteorologist C.D. Finley here. Welcome back to another episode of Weather Nerds. This is Weather Nerds episode 17. Last week you got to hear from our brand new meteorologist on the team, Brendan Jackson. This week we have another guest, but it might be a little bit more of a familiar face, especially if you've been watching the morning show here on KWTX. I am here with First Alert Meteorologist Sean Bellafiore. Sean, how's it going this morning?
It's going. Hey, quiet day of weather. Not too bad, and then more beautiful weather this upcoming weekend. I'm looking forward to that. So just steady as she goes right now.
Yeah,
can't complain.
Yeah, well, I want to say we got some changes coming up in the forecast too. So looking forward to those potential 80s heading into Labor Day weekend. So definitely got some good stuff coming up. Well, in today's episode of Weather Nerds, we're going to dive in a little bit more into the hurricane side of things, which, if you don't know already, Sean is really well versed in that. More well versed than I am, probably. So
helps when you live through them.
Yeah, it helps when I want to say being around Florida, I'm sure you've had your fair share of experiences. So, and I want to make sure before we get moving any further, I want to make sure that our live stream is actually continuing here on Facebook, because I'm seeing out of the corner of my eye, not changing all too much. Just want to make sure. I know we've got the recording rolling, so hopefully that's not too big of an issue. But
something's going.
Yeah, something's working. So this will work one way or another. And of course now the internet is being slow and not allowing me to check. So I guess we'll kind of see how this pans out. But, so, like I said, we're going to talk about hurricanes a little bit today. We have two major hurricane anniversaries that are coming up this week, some of which are actually nearing really close, about a day or two, if I remember correctly. So this first one that we're going to talk about was actually just a little bit more recent. Hurricane Harvey back in 2017. I know you were actually here still, I believe, at KWTX when Harvey happened. So before we dive too far into it, what do you remember from Harvey? What were your experiences on those days?
Man, those are the way back whens for me. 10 years of weather coverage in Central Texas. It's akin to me, kind of on the same page as kind of what happened with the big snow ice storm back in 2021. That you see what the forecast models are spitting out. You see all these metrics that are like, okay, this is going to be a big problem, and then you kind of discount them a little bit because it's like there's no way there's going to be 30 to 40 inches of rain from the system. But it literally was watching a disaster form and then just sit for days and days and days. And I just remember we did see some impacts here in Central Texas, a little bit of some steady rain, but I mean the worst of the impacts, is a dual threat system where you had the high rainfall totals that were across southeast Texas, and then you had the strong winds around the Rockport area where it made landfall. I remember watching a stream of like this blue shed that was out in Rockport, and it was like kind of going, was it going to give way or whatnot? And then, after a couple of hours of rain, you start to hear about the first reports of flooding in Houston. And, if you haven't been to Houston, there's a lot of really drastic elevation changes within the city. So, then you're adding a foot of rain, and now it's 2 feet of rain, and now it's almost 3 feet of rain. And it's just, watching it in slow motion was just absolutely heartbreaking to see. And, then I think it was the next year we had the similar system with Hurricane Florence, where it just the perfect setup for it to just stall and sit in the perfect position to just bring days of rain. It's still in my mind. It's hard to believe that it's been 8 years since Hurricane Harvey moved ashore, and it's still one of the ones whenever I go out to school visits, that's what I kind of show the kids. I guess the kids are getting a little bit on the young, staying the same age, and time keeps passing. So Hurricane Harvey, there's going to be some of them that weren't even born for Hurricane Harvey, but it is the worst natural disaster I thought that Texas was going to see in my time in Texas. And then 2021 happened, so many other different storms happening too, between tornadoes and everything. Then this past year with the flooding in the Kerrville area. So weather, it can be devastating. Yeah, it definitely can. I remember, so I was actually still in high school at the time that Harvey passed through. So this would have been August 2017, probably it was either, I think I was starting my junior year. So it would have been my junior year of high school, starting that fall semester.
And actually, if I hadn't started the fall semester, it was probably right at the tail end of summer. And so from what I remember anyway, I remember seeing all the extra outer rain bands kind of entering through here in Central Texas, like you were mentioning. But one of the things that sticks out in my mind is, so there's a YouTuber I used to watch at the time and still kind of do. Have you ever heard the name Casey Neistat?
Can't say that I have.
Okay, well, he was a big YouTuber, kind of still is a big YouTuber. He lived in New York, or lives in New York. Did a lot of basically daily vlogging videos is what he did. And so while we didn't see the direct impacts of all the flooding and stuff like that happened with Harvey in Central Texas, like you said, all of that happened across the Gulf Coast, around the Houston area. Well, Casey, his wife's family lived in the Houston area, and they were directly impacted by all the flooding and stuff. So I remember watching one of his daily vlogs around that time, and they were going down there to go visit their family and kind of help them do some cleanup because their house got hit pretty hard with all the flooding. And it always sticks out in my mind. You can literally see there was a point in the video where he walks into the bedroom, and you can see like all the sheets and stuff are taken off the mattress, but if you look at the mattress, you can see the clear water line of where the water used to stand. And I mean, it was probably a good 3/4 of the way up the mattress, and keep in mind the mattress is standing on a bed frame, so it's not like low to the ground. So, and it was at that moment that I saw that, and I was like, man, that was some really high water.
It's almost unfathomable. But I do remember, one of the worst kind of reports that came out of it. And, there are some reports with most every hurricane in the flood-prone areas. But then when you get, an entire pretty much coastline that is dealing with flooding, and especially one of the largest metro areas in the United States, of people having nowhere to go. So they just went up. And then they go into their attic and get stuck because the water's, right. It's just, you can't even think about it. And you could take something from all these storms, the big ones that happen, you learn as a meteorologist of, things to say, things to do. And I don't think I would have ever before Hurricane Harvey thought of, hey, if you are going up and, if you're stuck in your house and you can't get rescued and you are going up into your attic, you got to take an axe with you to punch through the roof if needs be. Never would have thought that would be something that would need to be in a hurricane preparedness kit. It's oof.
And I do want to just take a quick sidebar here. I realized the issue that we were having on Facebook Live, so you should be able to see our faces now aside from just the audio. So hopefully that comes through okay in the recording. I don't know why it wouldn't, but good news is you should be able to see us now on Facebook. So if you haven't seen us yet, hello. So diving a little bit further into Hurricane Harvey, I do have some video I want to share with you. I mean, we've been kind of discussing and describing what we saw and heard during those times. I do want to show you physically, though, what that flooding looked like. I did pull some older video from some of our older news sources at that time who were covering the stories of all the flooding during that time. So let's go ahead and take a look here, and you can just kind of see how devastating that flooding was. And actually, this video starts off showing some of the winds as Harvey was starting to make landfall. You can see the flags building the wind there. And then you can see this is a little bit of the aftermath, all that flooding. Look at how high the water is, covering up, pretty much all those bushes you see right there, almost a good maybe quarter way up to the wheel well of that truck that you saw there.
And this isn't even the worst of it.
Yeah,
I mean, there were whole houses that were inundated and completely flooded out. And I do remember that one of our old anchors, Taina Maya, she went with the Cajun Navy. There was a bunch of folks here in Central Texas. I want to say, if my memory serves me correctly, they were kind of coming out of Bell County, but she joined them to go down to the Houston area. They had their boats and everything and rescues, and she did some live reporting from there too. And I mean, it's just, especially if you know the city. And if you go in, whether or not you've been there for vacations, you live there, or just traveled through, and then all of a sudden you're going into this disaster area, I can't imagine just how shocking it was. There was one time, I want to say it was up near Canton, that I drove down I-20 that just a couple weeks after a tornado, and even just seeing the trees blown over was like, oh my gosh, this is shocking. So then you're going to basically a gigantic flood.
And
oof. rough time.
Very rough time, yeah. And then we also have, so that was some of the video. Obviously, you saw how devastating it was, but some more of the actual statistics in terms of what Harvey did in terms of rainfall amounts and stuff like that. You can find all of that on climate.gov, which is the website that I have pulled up here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. You can see, so this is a kind of a review of Hurricane Harvey's catastrophic rain and flooding. And if we hadn't mentioned it already, so Harvey actually made landfall in Rockport, Texas on August 25th, 2017. So as of the time of this podcast, this recording, that was actually about 2 days ago. So the anniversary of its landfall, at least, has already passed. But you can see the satellite image there, Hurricane Harvey, with a pretty solid little eye right there. Pretty large storm as it pushed through.
And this was actually one of the first hurricanes that the GOES satellites, the next generation, was able to view. And it was preliminary data while they tried to get all the nuts and bolts secured. But those weather satellites, I mean, it was literally like going from, not even HD, I would say, all the way up to 4K, because there was 30-second scans of the satellite imagery products for visible satellite. There was a minute scans, I think, or maybe even 30 seconds for the infrared satellite. So you can actually not only just see the structure of the storm, but you could actually see what we call mesovortices. They're smaller areas of spin that were in the eye wall. You can actually clearly pick them out on satellite. So a beautiful storm. It's hard to say, but
yeah.
it really was the first hurricane that we ever saw in that kind of a fashion. And I think that has helped us to really understand a lot more about what goes on in these hurricanes, and especially as they get close to landfall. These big hurricanes that all of a sudden, just like Aaron went from a Category 1 to a Category 5. Harvey had a rapid intensification cycle, and I think it really, the satellite imagery especially, really helped a lot of meteorologists just kind of figure what was going on. It's extra data for us, and we love data.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and speaking of data, let's go ahead and go back here. You can see, so this is actually the rainfall totals during Hurricane Harvey, and you can see kind of indicated there by some of the different shades of blue. The heaviest of that rainfall, according to this map, appears to have fallen just to the east of the Houston area.
Yes.
So kind of right there around the Beaumont area. That's where those deeper blues
are. I can't remember the exact city name, but it was a smaller town west of the Beaumont area that I think it still has the state total for rainfall, but it was 52 inches or 51 inches.
Something like that. Yeah, I remember kind of guesstimating. I think that's correct.
That's a year and a half worth of Central Texas rainfall.
Yeah, all in a period
3
of
days, 4 days.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah.
Well, and you can also see here, so the title of this is funny to me anyway. It's the hurricane that refused to leave. So Harvey, in order to drop all of that rainfall, it was kind of a slow-moving storm. There wasn't really too much in the way of steering for Harvey as it was kind of pushing its way in initially. Cold front, yeah.
It's one of those rare times. We have another cold front coming up this weekend, but a rare time that a cold front and a upper level trough kind of moved its way into the state during the month of October or August, and it just stopped. And it, the way that to think about stationary fronts is they kind of act like a wall.
Yep.
Not only is there weak steering currents aloft, but the stationary front does really act like a boundary that the hurricane sometimes can go past. But if it's stuck and not moving, that hurricane's going to slow down, which is exactly what it did.
Yeah, and that's why that's why you saw as much rainfall as it words English. I don't know how to English apparently today, but you kind of get the gist. That's why it dropped as much rain as it did, because it didn't move all that much because of that boundary, and because of that, it had nowhere else to go but where it was already. So, interesting and it kind of reminds me of, and obviously we had a little bit of a different setup in the atmosphere, I believe, for the flooding that happened this past summer, but it was a pretty similar situation where there wasn't too much, in terms of steering currents in the atmosphere with that tropical low that was associated with what used to be Barry from this past summer. And so a very similar situation, that low pressure area of low pressure, didn't have much area to move. And I believe we were actually under the influence of a high pressure dome at that time, if I remember correctly.
I think Barry's remnant energy went all the way to about El Paso, and then there was an upper level trough that kind of pushed everything east,
right,
and then departed. So just in the same way, there was no upper level steering currents, and there really isn't many or much in the way of steering currents in the middle of summer for us because we're usually under high pressure. So yeah, just days and days of rainfall, and then you got the warm temperatures, you got moisture that's in the perfect spot, you have a source of lift, and I think that's one of the big problems that have been running into over the last couple of years is we're not really seeing these, there are the moderate flooding events, but there have been some big floods, as we start to see more moisture in the atmosphere. The Gulf, temperatures are over 90 degrees. That water does evaporate and it gets pushed into, the Gulf Coast. Thinking about Kerrville, we talked about Harvey, Florence, another one of those hurricanes that just kind of sat and didn't move. And even, I want to say there was, earlier this summer too, there was even one thunderstorm that I think in New Mexico was just like this little baby thunderstorm that just sat in the right spot and dumped inches of rain over a period of time. And the water is becoming a big issue. Yeah,
definitely. Well, obviously we've talked a little bit about Hurricane Harvey. That was just one of the 2 hurricane anniversaries that we have coming up. And if I remember correctly, Sean, feel free to correct me on this, but based on my research, Harvey is the second costliest hurricane in United States history,
Sounds
I believe.
about right, yeah.
Adjusted for inflation, obviously, between different eras. But the first and probably the most well-known hurricane that has ever impacted the United States was Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. That one impacted the coast of Louisiana and Mississippi right there on the Gulf Coast, caused a lot of damage, and obviously is the costliest hurricane in United States history thus far. Also, obviously, adjusted for inflation. But it also happened in a very similar time frame. That anniversary is also coming up. So Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Rockport, Texas on August 25th, 2017. Hurricane Katrina made landfall near the border of Louisiana and Mississippi on August 29th, 2005. So only about 4 days difference between, well, obviously they
4 days and a couple years.
4 days and a couple years, obviously.
But just a decade.
Yeah. But in terms of, immediate hurricane season vicinity, if that makes sense, about 4 days difference between those two. So it's not unheard of to see some of these stronger hurricanes during the time that we are kind of in right now. Yeah. Thankfully, here in Central Texas, 2025, Gulf, Atlantic, quiet right now. So not having to worry about that all too much. But historically speaking, this has happened in the past, of course, with Harvey and Katrina. So let's go ahead and take a look at what some of the things that Katrina did. Obviously, if you think Harvey was, bad for the Houston area, it was just as bad for areas like New Orleans and areas across Louisiana and Mississippi in general. Do have some video for you here as well. This is obviously going to be some older footage, so it's not quite as high quality as what we saw with Harvey, but you can see some of the damage that Katrina did there. Lots of trees down, lots of flooding going on. You can see, looks like they're treating some people there on the roof, evacuating people. Look at how high that water is, too. I mean, one of the things that probably, I would imagine, set New Orleans apart from, the Houston area in terms of flooding. New Orleans is practically right on sea level. I mean,
it's underwater, actually.
Yeah.
There's parts of the city that are underwater, and now with the 20th anniversary, Keisha Lopez, one of our morning anchors, she was watching. I think there's a new documentary that ABC did, or it's on Hulu, talking about Katrina, and the issues with Katrina were just compounded by the failures of the levees. So Katrina just kind of came in at the exact perfect spot to get the water. I may be incorrect. It's been a couple years, but the way that it came in is that a lot of that water from Lake Pontchartrain was moved over the levees, and then the levees failed, so it literally was opening the floodgates, and it was 80% of New Orleans was flooded.
Wow. Yeah.
So what do you do? You try to do the best that you can with an evacuation. And I remember, because I was actually in the outer fringes of Katrina, I was going, it was like the first or second week in school, middle school for me, back in 2004. 2005. But Hurricane Katrina made landfall as a hurricane down in Miami, and I was about 60, 70 miles to the north of that in the West Palm Beach area. And I vividly remember looking up at the sky in between classes and seeing, like, this is Katrina. We see the clouds and everything, and we were under a tropical storm warning because at that point the warnings weren't quite as refined and pinpoint accurate as they really are now, but we had just a little bit of a breeze, and then all of a sudden it crosses over Florida, and it didn't look like it was going to be, we didn't know where it was going to go at that point, and trying to figure out a landfall location. Then you only have like 2 or 3 days to prepare for what became a major Category 5 hurricane at one point. Mm-hmm. And then, with technology 20 years ago, just pinpointing exactly where the hurricane was going to go, that's a lot of real estate that you have to evacuate, and especially when you're talking about a large city like New Orleans. Unfortunately, it's a lot of, lower demographics as far as income, so a lot of people can't evacuate, don't have the money to, and you go to the Superdome. Sure, it's a big evacuation point, but now what happens when the Superdome's roof collapses and water starts getting in, and just horrible all around. And even as I guess I would have been 12 at that point, even just as a 12-year-old aspiring meteorologist, like it was bad. and I remember watching the concert that was like simulcast. It was one of those good coming together moments as a country, and there was simulcast on all these different television stations of trying to raise money for Katrina, and people step up, but unfortunately it was 2,000 plus dead from the storm. So many different things. It's good that Katrina had, I don't want to say Katrina was good. More so that we learned a lot of lessons, I think, from Katrina. One of the things that happened in that storm is there were, as the storm made landfall, tornado warnings that were issued because the National Weather Service at that time didn't have any product to cover extreme winds that were not thunderstorm related and that were not tornado related.
Right.
And they're neither or. So, you have this hurricane warning that's moving in, and then there was a lot of people that were just all of a sudden under tornado warnings because, the wind speeds were 100, 120 plus. Yeah. So the product called the extreme wind warning, it was actually kind of tested in Katrina and then came into place a couple years later. Harvey was the second hurricane that we had an extreme wind warning get issued for. But, we wouldn't, taking lessons from Katrina, how do you as a weather communicator communicate when things are already really bad, that now you're under this tornado warning, but it's really not for a tornado, it's for the winds, you still need to take shelter. It's just a communications nightmare, and I think we as a weather enterprise have done a lot better since then of communicating those hazards. So definitely a little bit of some good, I guess, coming out of it, but utter devastation and still just seared in my memory. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I was going to say I have so similar website to what we were looking at with Harvey a second ago. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. This has all of the information about Katrina and some of the death toll numbers that you were just kind of alluding to. According to this, it caused 1,833 fatalities and approximately $108 billion in damage, and that's not adjusted for inflation. So after adjusted for inflation, I would imagine that number is probably a lot larger. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so you're pretty much right there on the mark, close to 2,000 fatalities with that storm. And if we just kind of scroll through here, you can see the path that Katrina did eventually take. So there's the path right there through South Florida, and then it barely
enters
a hurricane right as it moved ashore, and then just a day or two later, it was just this monster that was bearing down on the central Gulf Coast. And with Katrina too. I wasn't in Texas at the time. I was in Florida, obviously. But both Katrina and Harvey, there were a fair few refugees or people that were displaced that made the trek to Texas in order to escape the storm. And there were people, after the storm that were coming out here too. And some folks even never went back. the bad part, you can kind of see with the radar loop, you can kind of pinpoint where New Orleans is. Well, if you're in New Orleans, you have a couple of different places that you can evacuate. You can evacuate to the north, the west, or the east.
Yep.
And you can't really evacuate to the north because that's also going to be bringing, the system's still going to be impacting there. If you evacuate to the east, well, you're going to go to like Slidell, Louisiana, or Slidell, Mississippi, which got absolutely clobbered by the strong winds. So the only place to go is west, and yeah, I mean, it just so many folks. Our meteorologist Jillian, she actually met her husband who was evacuated from Hurricane Harvey, and was in Central Texas. So so many moving parts, and I don't really know what else to say about it. I don't want to get in too much trouble, but I mean, there was, the response was what it was, unfortunately, way lacking. But I think Katrina, we talk about Hurricane Andrew in Florida a lot, of being like the red letter of the things change because of Hurricane Andrew in Florida. And same thing with the Gulf Coast. Things changed in a pretty permanent way for Katrina.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so that's just a little bit about the two anniversaries that we have coming up for Katrina and Harvey. Harvey was 2017, 8 years ago at this point. Katrina, 2005, coming up on that 20th anniversary. Again, Katrina made landfall on August 29th, so about 2 days from the time of this recording. Obviously, if you're watching the recording on Degrees of Science, it's probably a little bit different for you, but yeah, so 20-year anniversary of Katrina this year. So that's kind of a bit of a retrospective on both of those hurricanes. Obviously, both very devastating hurricanes. What's going on a little bit more, recent in terms of weather here, not just across Central Texas, but across the nation? Well, one of the things that kind of went viral on social media for a lot of different reasons was what happened in Arizona just a few days ago. That giant dust storm that pushed through Arizona.
The haboob.
So, the haboob,
yes.
Fun
That's
word
that's the word for it, the actual word instead of dust storm. The meteorological term. The video, you're going to pop it up in a second.
Pop this up here.
I mean, if I didn't know any better, I was like, this is a severe thunderstorm. We have a gigantic a shelf cloud moving towards the city. Is about to get hit real hard, and it's just a wall of dust. And I can say from traveling out to Phoenix, I went there last summer. Last summer, I saw more rain in Phoenix than we did here in Central Texas, just in my 2 days there. But it does not take much to get the dust kicked up. And I believe it was from some monsoonal rains. Yeah, so there were some storms out there that produced some outflow boundaries, and those boundaries picked up all the dust and the wind. So it's actually a really good showcase of when we talk about outflow boundaries, especially in the summertime months. Outflow boundary is rain cooled air coming out of these storms as they start to collapse, or even they may not even be collapsing. They could just be sending out a wave of energy, but most likely those storms collapse. They send out that cooler rain cooled air, and it acts just the same as a cold front does. It's just a smaller scale, and doesn't really bring that lasting temperature change, but you can see the dust getting kind of shoved up, and it's it's a pretty sharp shove into the atmosphere, that very sharp angle. And it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going and swallowing things up. I think they said there was 50-foot visibility at one point. Yeah, there was. So it actually moved over the international airport there in Phoenix, and they were reporting practically zero visibility at one point. So yeah, and I know there were a lot of different, obviously airplane delays, airline delays, flight delays. And there was one video actually that I unfortunately can't show you right now because I didn't queue it up. But there was one video that a meteorologist that I follow up in Oklahoma City, his name's Damon Lane, he works for KOCO5 up there. He reposted a video from Arizona State University of their football stadium. And so, of course, it's getting ready to be college football season. I think we got some of the first games that have happened already, if not coming up this weekend. Friday and Baylor, and Saturday. Oh boy, I'm sitting on the couch. But you were saying. So their football stadium was obviously impacted by this giant dust storm, and you can see in the foreground the storm starting to move in, and then all of a sudden the sky just goes black. And then the only thing I could think to myself as I was watching this video, I was like, man, that's going to be a lot of cleanup to do before the games that come up on Friday and Saturday. It's like Tatooine.
Yeah, you're literally playing football in
dust.
Tatooine.
Yeah, and then the after the literal dust settles, the cleanup of it, all those car wash owners, they made out like bandits.
Yeah, no, all those
day.
car washes are making profits out there in Arizona. I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
If they weren't already, they are now.
Yeah, that's true. Dust storms, we jest, but especially for folks that are hard breathing, asthma, allergies, that could really, really do some damage to your respiratory system. So, if it was longer than, just a day or, a couple hours, you might have been seeing people walking around in masks the next day, just like, with the wildfires out in California earlier this year. They're just all the smoke and stuff. So even if it's not storming, the weather can still cause some damage.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up allergies, because that's going to bring us to our last topic, which is kind of teasing what we've been doing on not just the Degrees of Science YouTube channel, but on the weather team in general. We've been kind of working out weekly packages for the last few weeks now, last 2 or 3 weeks. The first one that we did, if you didn't catch it a few weeks ago, Brendan Jackson and we both cooked cookies inside of our First Alert Weather Explorer, which somehow managed to work out. Brendan and Brady both ate them. I didn't eat them. They're still alive, so maybe I could have eaten them. But, I was just like...
There were no bake, too. So technically there wasn't any reason you couldn't
eat them. Technically there wasn't.
I had the cookie dough, the raw cookie dough.
Actually, Sean had some of the raw cookie dough before we even baked them. So
I'd rather risk it raw than sitting in the car for like 8 hours.
Maybe I'm just a pansy. Who knows? So that was the first story that we did, kind of showcasing how hot it can get inside of a car. I mean, if it's hot enough to bake cookies inside of a car, you definitely don't want to be, leaving things or children or anything unattended in vehicles. And it's just
anything alive.
Anything alive, big no. So that was the first story that we did. Second story, I did a little bit of an explainer on how dust devils work, which kind of ties in a little bit to the dust story that we just did a second ago. But did a little bit of an explainer there. It's about 1.5 minutes long. Check that out if you haven't seen it already. This week is a little bit more about allergies, which is what we just kind of alluded to a second ago. So ragweed season coming up. It's
right around the corner.
Right around the corner. One of the more heavy allergies that we get here in Central Texas, outside of, I believe, mountain cedar.
Cedar, yes. Cedar comes back. That's a wintertime thing. So pretty much right when the ragweed ends, the cedar kicks its way back up. Yeah. And especially when you get those real strong winds that we get with those cold fronts, that'll
you'll carry all that pollen.
You'll see the tree sneeze and then cause all of us to sneeze.
Yep. So ragweed is a little bit closer than cedar season, obviously, but so ragweed usually kind of starts picking up right as we transition out of summer and into fall. Ragweed's a weed that's pretty common, not just around here, but in the U.S. in general, so it's not just us. It's going to be feeling these allergies once the season starts to kick up. But I did talk to Dr. Ray Rodriguez from Baylor Scott and White Health to kind of learn a little bit about, exactly what ragweed is and what you can do to kind of treat the symptoms of ragweed once you start feeling those symptoms. So let's go ahead and jump in here. This is a story that I did. It's up on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel, and we kind of show it to you here as well. Ragweed is a weed that is common in the U.S. and causes many to have allergy symptoms. According to Dr. Rodriguez of Baylor Scott and White Health, during the fall season, ragweed matures and releases pollen.
Usually the pollens tend to bloom mostly from August all the way to the first frost. And patients may have more symptoms during that time of the year.
Symptoms range from sneezing and watery eyes to asthma issues. And to treat these, Dr. Rodriguez says that the first step is avoidance, which is difficult to do. So what should you do?
You have to use your medications every day. Take your non-sedating antihistamines, take your nasal allergy spray. Also, while outside, you're breathing on the pollen to your nose. So I recommend to use saline nasal spray.
And Dr. Rodriguez also suggests taking care of the things you might not think of.
You need to change the filters of your AC unit, more frequently. You know how the AC works by bringing the outside air into the cooling unit and blowing that cold air inside the house. So you need to have a good filter. If they have pets, remember when the pets go outside to do their stuff, they bring all that pollen into their fur. So try to, not you, but somebody else in the house to clean the dog frequently or the cat, You can give them a bath, or you can use those wipes they use for pets to wipe them off.
And if you still have strong symptoms after taking these precautions, reach out to your doctor about next steps. From KWTX, I'm First Alert Meteorologist C.D. Finley. So yeah, a little bit of an interesting interview there with Dr. Ray Rodriguez. Obviously, all the preventative things in terms of like doing nasal sprays, taking your allergy medicines, all that stuff that I've heard before. But he even took it a step further, as you heard there a moment ago, of if you really want to be preventative with this kind of thing, make sure you're changing your air filter and your AC all the time, a little bit more, not all the time, but a little more frequently than you probably usually do. And then also making sure you're washing your pets. If you have pets, they go outside, they do their business, they can get all kinds of pollen stuck in their fur. So, the more often you wash them, the less likely you are to, start sneezing or coughing or, having those allergic symptoms. So, yeah, interesting interview there with Dr. Ray Rodriguez. Some things that I'd never really thought of when it comes to preventing your allergy symptoms. So if you haven't checked that out already, it's on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel. It was also ran in our 4 and 6 p.m. newscasts yesterday. I don't know if it'll get run again, but if you want to see it, you can go check it out on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel, which, by the way, as we wrap up here, I'm going to go ahead and show you where you can find all of that and kind of some of the other stuff that we're doing here on the First Alert Weather Team. So let's pull up our YouTube page here. So you can see all the most recent videos that we've uploaded there. Of course, you can see the ragweed season video right there. We also upload all of our episodes of KWTX Weather Extra. So if you don't catch those live after the 10 p.m. newscast on Sundays, you can go back and watch the full thing there on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel. Also, you can clearly see the last episode of Weather Nerds is also on here. So if you haven't been able to catch these live, you can also catch them on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel. If you go right up here to this top tab where it says Podcasts, click on that. You can see the whole playlist of all the episodes of Weather Nerds minus episode 1. Episode 1 is not up there because that was kind of a test run with Chief Meteorologist Brady Taylor and I, and Brady's microphone was not on the entire time. So figured
lost
that
time
yeah,
forever.
it's lost media now. So but yeah, episodes 2 all the way up to, of course, this one will also be uploaded there on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel. You can also find the other episodes of Degrees of Science itself, obviously. Our Chief Meteorologist Brady Taylor has a pretty good video up there about the New World screwworm and how that might, affect some cattle ranchers in Central Texas, or not just Texas in general. So, and I know this kind of been in the news a lot recently too with the screwworm. So
Mid-Atlantic, I think, is
yeah.
Virginia, if I remember correctly, or
I
somewhere
believe
around
so.
there.
Yeah, they're actually, it was the first confirmed human case, and it was from, if I read correctly, it was from someone who was traveling from somewhere, and so they just happened to bring it back with them, which one of the reactions that Brady and I had when we first read that, we were like, man, how messy do you have to be to not, like, I mean, what they do is they thrive on cuts and stuff. Anyway, if you want to check that out, watch the video, because it's obviously Brady will know a little bit more about that than I do.
Have an iron stomach too, apparently.
Yeah. You know, some of the images that come out from those stories are not for the faint of heart. So
no thanks.
Well, I think that wraps it up for us here on this episode of Weather Nerds. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're live on Facebook, thank you for joining us. I apologize for some of the video issues we had there in the first little bit. Hopefully that turns out okay in the recording that you see on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel. So that's been episode 17 of Weather Nerds. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We will see you hopefully next week for episode number 18.